So this equilibrium quantity, what's so special about it? Well, for one thing, it produces the eventual end state in a market. So eventually, this is how your market will be. There will be an equilibrium price and an equilibrium quantity for almost every good in the world. But what's, again, so special about this equilibrium price, this ending price and this ending quantity? Well, in economics, we realize that this is actually the quantity and the price that maximizes welfare. How is that so? Because at that price, at that quantity, your consumer and your producer's surplus, which represents the welfare of your consumers and producers, those are maximized. Now think about it. At a quantity that is lower than the optimal quantity, what happens? Well, the consumer surplus becomes less because your consumers don't get to consume that much. So the triangle actually shrinks to a smaller portion. At the same time, your producers don't get to produce that much because your consumers don't consume that much because it's at a lower quantity, it's not at the optimal quantity. So what then happens is that your producers don't get to sell that much and then lose a bit of the surplus. Now, question is, what happens if the quantity is set to be something like more than the equilibrium quantity? Well, that's what happens. Your producers will then produce a lot more, right? And your producers will only be able to sell at a higher price. And that high price is too much for the consumers to take. So instead, at that high price, they won't consume all that the producers take. Instead, they will only consume at a lower quantity. So eventually, it goes back to the same case as what happens if we had a lower quantity than the optimum quantity. So eventually, it leads to a suboptimal distribution of surplus, like you can see the consumer surplus and the producer surplus as well. You can think of it in the same way for prices. If I set a price that is higher than the equilibrium price, what happens is that the consumer surplus becomes very low because the consumers are not willing to buy at that much at that high price. So the producers at the same time, they don't get to sell that much as well because the consumers don't buy that much. And eventually the producer surplus get affected as well. And if you set a lower price than the equilibrium quantity, same thing, your producers are not willing to produce that much. So they get a smaller amount of producer surplus. And same thing for the consumers, they don't get to consume that much. So their consumer surplus gets affected. So the equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity is the only price and quantity at which the consumers and the producer surplus is maximized.